Life, in its true nature, does not experience absence or incompleteness. What feels missing belongs to the realm of appearances, to the way the mind interprets itself and the world. When attention becomes fixed on forms, circumstances, and comparisons, the mind begins to believe that it is incomplete, that it must become something else in order to be whole. From this misunderstanding, a silent search begins. The mind looks ahead, imagining a future moment when everything will finally make sense. It believes that fulfillment lies somewhere beyond the present, in a different situation, a different version of itself, or a different outcome. And so, even while life is unfolding, the mind waits. But the feeling of waiting is itself a sign of confusion. Nothing in true life is delayed. Nothing essential is postponed. The idea that something fundamental is missing arises only when appearance is mistaken for reality. The mind measures itself against images it has created, and then concludes that it falls short. This sense of lack is not a flaw. It is not a failure. It is a signal that awareness has turned away from its source and become absorbed in surface impressions. When this happens, the mind forgets what it truly is and begins to experience itself as separate, limited, and incomplete. Yet the feeling of something missing is not pointing to what you lack. It is pointing to what you have overlooked. It is an invitation to stop searching outward and begin recognizing what has always been present. Not as a concept, not as a belief, but as a direct awareness. Nothing has gone missing in your true life. What feels absent exists only in the interpretation. And the moment this is even gently seen, the urgency to search begins to soften. The mind pauses. And in that pause, the possibility of recognition quietly opens. Once the mind accepts the idea that something is missing, it naturally begins to search. It looks outward for completion, believing that fulfillment must be found in circumstances, achievements, relationships, or future outcomes. This search feels reasonable, even necessary, because the mind assumes that wholeness is something to be acquired. But this assumption is the mistake itself. The search for completion is based on the belief that life began incomplete. From this false starting point, every effort to become whole only reinforces the sense of lack. The mind moves from one expectation to another, always anticipating a moment when something external will finally resolve the inner feeling of absence. The problem is not in the objects of the search, but in the direction. Nothing external can complete what was never incomplete. Circumstances can change, conditions can improve, and experiences can be meaningful. Yet none of these touch the core of being. When the mind depends on them for fulfillment, it remains in constant movement, never resting. This outward search also creates comparison. The mind measures itself against others, against ideals, against imagined versions of life. From these comparisons, judgments arise. I am behind. I am lacking. I am not there yet. These judgments feel personal, but they are based on appearances, not truth. True life does not compete. It does not measure itself. It does not advance toward wholeness, because it already is whole. The very act of searching for completion hides this fact. The mind looks everywhere except where truth is already present. This is why the search never ends. Each achievement briefly distracts the sense of lack, but soon the feeling returns, because the original misunderstanding has not been addressed. The belief in incompleteness remains untouched, and so the cycle continues. The mistake is subtle but decisive, looking outside for what can only be recognized within. Completion is not found through accumulation or effort. It is revealed the moment the mind stops assuming that something essential is missing. And when this assumption is questioned, the search begins to lose its urgency. The mind slows down. Attention turns inward, not to find something new, but to notice what has always been there. In truth, your true self has never been incomplete. Wholeness is not something that develops over time, nor is it something that can be gained or lost. It belongs to the very nature of life itself. What is real does not emerge fragmented, and it does not require correction in order to be whole. The sense of incompleteness arises only when identity is placed in appearances. The mind looks at changing conditions, emotions, and circumstances, and assumes that they define what you are. From this perspective, life seems divided, sometimes sufficient, sometimes lacking. But this division exists only in perception, not in reality. Your true self exists prior to all conditions. It is not formed by experiences, achievements, or failures. It is the life that is already present, already functioning, already expressing itself without effort. Nothing needs to be added to it, because nothing is missing from it. This is why no amount of external improvement can bring lasting fulfillment. Fulfillment is not created by adding something to life. It is revealed when the false idea of lack dissolves. The moment the mind stops identifying with appearances, it begins to recognize the deeper continuity of being that has never been interrupted. Wholeness does not depend on circumstances aligning in a certain way. It does not wait for healing, success, or understanding. It exists now, exactly as life exists now. Even when confusion is present, wholeness remains untouched. Even when emotions fluctuate, the foundation does not change. What you truly are has never been damaged, divided, or diminished. The belief that something essential was lost is only a belief. And like all beliefs that do not correspond to truth, it dissolves when truth is recognized. This recognition does not require effort. It is not something you practice or cultivate. It happens naturally when attention returns to what does not change. When this happens, the mind no longer feels the need to complete itself. It rests. Your true self is not becoming whole. It has always been whole. And as this truth settles, even quietly, the sense of lack that once seemed personal begins to fade. What remains is a calm certainty, not an idea, but an awareness that nothing essential has ever been missing. The idea that wholeness must be achieved is one of the most persistent misunderstandings of the mind. From early on, we are taught to believe that we must improve, evolve, heal, or become something more in order to feel complete. This belief turns life into a continuous project and places the mind in a permanent state of effort. But wholeness does not belong to the future. It is not a reward for progress, nor the result of personal development. What is whole cannot be assembled, repaired, or perfected. It already exists as it is. The belief that you must reach wholeness keeps attention focused on what seems unfinished, reinforcing the illusion of lack. Recognition changes everything. When the mind stops trying to become whole and begins to see what is already present, effort naturally dissolves. There is nothing to build, nothing to fix, and nothing to overcome. The struggle ends not because something has been accomplished, but because the false premise behind the struggle has been exposed. This is why recognition feels like relief. It is not dramatic or forceful. It does not require discipline or control. It simply reveals that the tension was never necessary. The mind relaxes when it realizes it has been trying to do what was never required. Wholeness is not hidden behind thoughts or emotions. It is not blocked by fear or confusion. These are appearances that come and go. Wholeness remains unchanged beneath them. The moment this is understood, the mind no longer tries to remove obstacles in order to be complete. It allows appearances to pass without resistance. This does not mean that experiences stop or that life becomes static. It means that experiences no longer define what you are. They are seen in their proper place, as movements on the surface, not statements about reality itself. Recognition is simple, but not superficial. It goes beyond understanding concepts and enters direct awareness. In that awareness, the question, "How do I become whole?" no longer makes sense. The answer is already present in the seeing. You do not achieve wholeness. You recognize it. And in that recognition, the long search comes quietly to an end. Now, allow yourself to rest in what has been recognized. There is nothing more to search for and nothing more to complete. The sense of lack that once felt personal was never a reflection of your true life. It belonged only to a mistaken perception, and that perception has begun to dissolve. You do not need to hold on to these words. Truth does not require repetition or effort to remain present. Once seen, it stands on its own. Your true self does not depend on circumstances, progress, or understanding to be whole. It is whole now, exactly as life is now. Remain still for a moment. Let thoughts come and go, without engagement. Let sensations rise and fall, without interpretation. None of these movements affect what you truly are. Beneath them, wholeness remains untouched, calm, and complete. There is nothing you need to add to yourself, nothing you need to remove, nothing you need to become. Life is not waiting for you to arrive somewhere else. It is fully expressed here. And as you rest in this awareness, the effort to define yourself through appearances naturally fades. What remains is a quiet certainty, not emotional, not conceptual, simply clear. If this message helped you recognize even a small part of this truth, I invite you to stay connected. Subscribe to this channel so these reminders can continue to reach you when they are needed. And if you wish, you may write in the comments, "I am whole," not as an affirmation to repeat, but as a recognition of what has always been true. Remain in this awareness for a few moments. Nothing is missing. Nothing needs to be fixed. You are already whole.